Hello there. The right-wing populist Sweden Democrats are the second force in the country after the elections. And their face on all channels is Jimmie Åkesson. But who is this man? The big winners of the elections are without a doubt the Sweden Democrats, said election analyst Mats Knudsen on Swedish television on Monday. The results of the parliamentary elections were not yet known at that point. The fact was, however, that the extreme right-wing Sweden Democrats were the most successful populists in Scandinavia. The results are now in, which would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. With around a fifth of the votes, the Sweden Democrats are the second strongest force in Sweden. According to the latest projections, a conservative four-party bloc led by Ulf Kristersson from the moderates has an extremely narrow lead over Prime Minister Andersson's left-wing camp. Lee Benich-Björkman, a political scientist at Uppsala University, sees a turning point in Swedish politics. It's a crucial election because the Sweden Democrats have reached a stage where they've got the other parties to accept them. That's what she told the New York Times. And their chest is correspondingly broad now. Jimmie Åkesson, the 43-year-old party leader, made it clear shortly after the election result, in view of the record result, his party wants to sit in a government with a majority. Åkesson represents the Sweden Democrats like no other. He has been their chairman for 17 years, giving the party, which used to be openly racist, more and more percentages. The man for whom things went up rapidly comes from the southern Swedish province of Scania. The son of a craftsman and a nurse went after school to the student city of Lund. There he was enrolled in law, political science and philosophy. He didn't graduate. Politically, Åkesson was at home somewhere else when he was young, namely with the moderates. In the mid-1990s, he was drawn to the Sweden Democrats, and their logo back then was a flaming torch. At the time, the party was still openly racist. Its founding members in 1988 came from Sweden's far-right scene. As early as 2005, Åkesson rose to the top of the Sweden Democrats and from then on tried to change the image of the party, away from the right-wing extremist and towards the middle. The burning torch became a flower in that time. Critics warn that Åkesson merely changed the party's rhetoric. This is also shown by a message that made headlines 10 days before the election. A politician from the Sweden Democrats invited his colleagues to celebrate the start of the Second World War together. The party uses anti-immigration and Islamophobic tones, and Åkesson clearly formulates his aversion to migrants and foreign cultures. In a 2009 article, he described Muslims as the greatest threat to Sweden since the Second World War. The current election program or manifesto of his party provides for a strict tightening of immigration and asylum law. Observers also like to compare Åkesson to former US President Donald Trump, mainly because of his rhetoric. It's time to give us the chance to make Sweden great again. That's what he called out at campaign events, for example. Make America Great Again was also the motto of Trump's campaign ahead of the 2016 presidential election, which he won, unfortunately. Åkesson is also successful with his line. While the right-wing populists in Denmark and Norway suffered heavy losses in the last elections, the Swedish party around its longtime leader has made steady gains over the years. When it first entered the Reichstag in Stockholm in 2010, it received 5.7% of the votes. 4 years later, it was already 12.9%, and in 2018, it was even 17.5%. And now Åkesson's party is the second strongest force. The party has recently been given issues that are easy to deal with populistically, and to which the other parties cannot find satisfactory answers, such as gang crime in the country's suburbs. Deadly shootings and deliberate explosions occur time and again. This year alone, according to official statistics, 74 people have been injured by gunshots and 47 have died in shootings. Around the capital Stockholm alone, 22 people were shot. The response of the Sweden Democrats is they link the issue with another one, with migration, of course. The political discussions, which in Sweden usually revolve around taxes and the economy, have thus acquired a cultural dimension. That was said by Jimmie Åkesson, professor of political science at the University of Gothenburg, and he told this to the New York Times. Other Swedish parties, particularly the Conservatives, went along with it. It was obvious how the others approached them. Åkesson told Reuters that they would have moved close to us so as not to lose even more voters, although copying them always makes them stronger. We know this from the AfD here. How powerful Åkesson and the Sweden Democrats become now depends on how much the conservative bloc parties involve them. At noon on Monday, he stopped by the moderates in Stockholm, who urgently needed his party's votes in parliament for proposed legislation. However, the moderates have so far rejected a coalition with the Sweden Democrats, even though the conservative bloc opened up to cooperation with the right-wing populists for the first time in the past term of office. Forming a government doesn't make it any easier. After the 2018 election, the parties had been fighting for a minority government for months. Finding a majority in the Swedish parliament is now becoming even more complicated. For Professor Jimmie Åkesson, the Sweden Democrats' success tells a story about how one of the most politically stable countries in the world got into trouble. Before that, there were always two blocs and politics was predictable. However, the Sweden Democrats turned that on its head. Now we have a situation that is not predictable at all, he said. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.